Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. Guys, we have with us a fantastic guest this evening, and she's running a little late. But while we're waiting on her to get here, we will share with you her biography. You will be very thrilled and enthused. Hopefully, you guys will come on and FaceTime with our guest this evening, Miss Michelle Dickinson. Michelle Lee Dickinson is a passionate mental health advocate. She's a TEDx speaker and a published author of a memoir entitled Breaking into My Life. After years of playing the role of child caregiver, Michelle embarked on her own healing journey of self discovery. Her memoir offers a rare glimpse into a young girl's experience living with and loving her bipolar mother. Michelle spent years working to eradicate the mental health stigma within her own workplace by elevating compassion, causing more open conversations, and leading real change in how mental illness is understood in the corporate setting. She also knows firsthand what it feels like to struggle with a mental illness after experiencing depression due to challenging life events of her own. Michelle recently concluded her 19-year pharmaceutical career, and she has emerged with a strong desire to positively impact the mental health landscape. Michelle is also committed to improving the lives of youth. As a past volunteer with court appointed special advocates, the Make a Wish Foundation, and serving as Big Sister with the Big Brothers Big Sisters, elevating the well being of our youth matters to her. Michelle's volunteer work led her to create her own children's program called Perfect, Just the Way You Are. This program was designed to help you better understand how to nourish the body and the mind, and has reached over 2,000 children and their families in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and over the past 5 years. The program has recently evolved into a school wide and student led mental health wellness fair. Her intentions are to touch as many children's lives with this program so that children proactively develop a healthy relationship to brain health. Now, this evening, once Michelle arrives, she's having some issues in traffic and she's trying to get to the place so that she can join the broadcast. But we just want to give you a little bit more about Michelle. Michelle will share with you many things, so we do not want to spoil that. Most definitely, we want her to have the opportunity to share with you all the things she'll be talking about today. However, we will be addressing mental illness, the stigma of mental illness, and how many of us, if not all of us, have have trepidations, quite frankly, about discussing the topic or admitting that there may be issues. We know that there are many therapists out there, psychologists, psychiatrists, and others that work with this professionally. However, we will also discuss how do you address issues of mental illness when you are not a professional, or when you are embarrassed, or when you feel very, for lack of a better word, less confident in yourself because of the mental illness that you may be unfortunately dealing with. So we want you guys to indulge us for a moment. Please allow Michelle to join the set, and we are anxiously awaiting her arrival. But Michelle has shared many stories with me, and as I read in her bio, having had to be a caregiver for her mom, who was bipolar, and she discussed many episodes and about sitting and watching her mom cry profusely on a continuous basis, feeling completely hopeless and helpless because she was saddened and frustrated that she could not help her mother in her dilemma. So, if there are those of you out there that may want to come on and speak with Michelle personally, please feel free to come in and FaceTime us as soon as she arrives. Or if you'd like to come in while we're awaiting her arrival and discuss some of your mental, uh, I won't say mental ill, let me rephrase that, please. Some of your psychological challenges that may hinge on mental illness, and then please feel free to do so. Please feel free to join us and take the stage while we await the arrival of Michelle Dickinson. I think we'll all agree that this is a heavy conversation, simply from the standpoint of things I alluded to earlier, is that it's just taboo many times to discuss situations. People are apprehensive about admitting that they or someone they love suffer with what we call mental illness. It comes in many forms, or we may share it in many forms, calling it depression, which I'm sure that that is an appropriate situation when people become depressed. Does that mean that they are having mental ill issues? I don't. I'm not a professional, but it's just some questions that we'll be talking about with Michelle. Her intentions are to touch as many children's lives with this program so that children proactively develop a healthy relationship to brain health. Good afternoon, Miss Michelle Dickinson.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Well, listen, it is certainly our pleasure to have you. We're certainly happy that you're here, and it's very exciting that you're here. So, listen, let's just jump right in. And I know you and I talked about some things previously, and can we just start off as you if you share with us a little bit of your experience about growing up with a bipolar mom and what you learned as a child as a caregiver?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up with a mom who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And for people who don't know what that is, it's a mental illness that affects the brain that causes someone to have severe rapid cycling of their mood. So my mom would have extreme mania and then very deep depression. She struggled with that for my entire childhood. She spent a lot of visits in the hospital being treated for severe depression and anxiety. And that experience and taught me a lot. And it was hard. It was extremely challenging to care for someone who you find sitting on the couch crying for days. But then when she had her mania, created Disney for you because she was in a space of happy euphoria. So how do you not experience those highs? So that part was kind of exciting for me.
Okay, Michelle, if I can ask this question, most of us, regardless of any situation,
Yeah.
when it comes to our parents,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes very difficult. Did you feel unfairly burdened at any point in time? Or were you, obviously you were empathetic and sympathetic to your mom,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes we know life can really get to us, even when things are happening with our loved ones. Was there ever a time when you just felt unfairly burdened?
You know, Melvin, that was my normal for me growing up with her and her moods. That was my normal. I didn't know any different until I think I reached my teenage years and I got to experience the relationship of my girlfriends with their mothers and the dynamics in the house and how drastically different they were from mine, right? I was constantly on eggshells worrying what my mother was going to, if she was going to be upset, if she was going to be happy. I just never knew the mom I was going to get when I came home. So up until that point, I really didn't know any different. And when I saw my girlfriend Robin and her mom interacting, I did get a little jealous because I thought, well, that looks normal. That looks loving. That looks very nurturing. These were things that I missed because my mom was just, so in her own world dealing with her own mental illness.
Okay. Now, were there, or should I say, are there other siblings as well?
So I grew up with two cousins that came to live with us for about 10 years. And so they were sort of raised like my siblings, but they were really cousins. But they left the home. Like I said, they were with us about 10 years, but then they eventually left the home abruptly. They didn't want to be there because of my mom's illness. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, listen, you have a very interesting book, and I know that you shared with us earlier in the bio about some of the challenges that you dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you were going to speak with us about your healing journey
Mm-hmm.
and about writing your book to help others understand
Mm-hmm.
mental illness and to help remove that stigma.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump right into it.
Sure. So I was very fortunate I guess it was about 7 years ago, to be invited to speak on the TEDx stage and tell my story. I had a colleague of mine nominate me. And so I prepared and finally, for the first time, told my story of growing up with my mom in a public forum. And the response that I got was very encouraging and very motivating. And it actually caused me to want to write my memoir. So it was like the beginning of the healing journey in that regard. So I sat down and for 4 years, I unearthed a lot of experiences from my childhood to really vividly share with people what that experience was like for me, so they could understand mental illness, maybe fear it less, really humanize that experience for people. So over that 4-year period, it was very cathartic, very emotional. I wrote the book and I released it in the beginning of 2018. And then since then, I've just been using it as a vehicle to cause conversation.
Okay. Okay. When we talk about writing books and reasons why we write them and overcoming certain fears, have you met with a lot of negativity prior to writing the book because people didn't understand maybe the dilemmas that you were going through, or the I mean, not only as a
Mm-hmm.
caregiver, but as a person that was having some challenges themselves. Did you find people to be warm, or were they distant, cold?
Yeah, I think, first of all, for me to tell my story at work was very vulnerable of me to very openly share that and put myself kind of out there was very challenging. And so, in a very, corporate environment, it wasn't for everyone, right? Certain people looked the
Okay.
other way. They didn't want to even acknowledge what you did, what you shared, whatever. It was very uncomfortable. And mental illness in general can be very uncomfortable for people. So I understood it. But I think that was probably the only, less than positive experience, because the reactions and the love and the support that I've received since I told my story, wrote my book, released the book openly, do public speaking, has been like abundant. I get so much love, support. I get emails, I get messages. I got a card from a young girl who's 15 years old who said, "My mom has bipolar, and I read your book, and you've given me hope that I'm going to be okay."
Wow.
So
Wow.
those are the stories, and those are the interactions that continue to blow my mind.
Yeah. Well, listen. Was it difficult writing the book? I many times when I speak with people about writing books that are near and dear to me, they always ask me if it was difficult, and for me, it wasn't.
Okay.
But was it difficult writing the book because of the challenges that you were faced with?
Yeah. So my mom was abusive. There's no two ways about it. She was verbally abusive, physically abusive, emotionally abusive, and she had bipolar disorder. So I learned later on in life to separate her from her illness and acknowledge the woman she was and the illness that she had, right? Two very separate things. And I couldn't get there until I
Hmm.
did a lot of healing. So, because of the abuse, I had a writing coach who was guiding me through this process. She wanted me to vividly recall those experiences so that I could write it in a way where the reader was with me on that journey. That was hard because I had to relive the physical abuse and how I was feeling and the smell in the room and the emotions and the thoughts in my head as I was, as she was beating me, basically. So that was hard. Of course, that was hard. Um, but the final, output of that was people got it. People understood my experience and they were with me on the journey. So I felt like it was worth it.
Okay, Jason, thanks for joining us. Okay, I thought Jason was joining us. He was here shortly. Thought he may have had a question. However, well, listen, and let me share with you, Michelle, on my other monitors, you're getting a lot of hearts up and a lot of thumbs up, and I'm happy about
Oh,
that. They waited patiently for you to get here. So I just want to thank you guys. I just want to yeah, thanks for the love. Give them the love. I just want
so
to.
sweet.
Okay, now you were saying on some of the questions we discussed in my passion for driving real change within corporate cultures. I know you addressed this a little bit, culture, so that people with invisible
Yeah.
disabilities can be themselves and feel accepted and supported in the workplace. And you said how workplace can do more for
Yeah.
employees. Can you touch on that a little bit more specifically as to how the workplace can help and assist more with employees that's dealing with those challenges?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things here. When you think about diversity and inclusion and creating an environment for people with all kinds of, disabilities, whether they're physical or they're not, or they're invisible. I think that, our workplaces, we spend so many hours a day in our workplaces, in our environments. And I think people with mental illnesses tend to, okay, leave that illness at home and come to work. But the reality is, wouldn't it be a beautiful thing if they could bring their whole self to work, right? And they were
Yes.
accepted for who they were. If they needed, maybe they needed, special accommodations because maybe they're autistic, or, their sensitivity to noise, or whatever it is. Like, why don't we make an environment for them that is inclusive for them, as well as we would a ramp for someone in a wheelchair? So I was fortunate to be, in my role where at my former company, and we for 2 years worked on a stigma-free environment within the company. And there were a lot of levers that we pulled to create that. And one was an employee resource group. So just like any other employee resource group in an organization, for any particular group of individuals that want the support of each other, we created one for mental health. And then there was this amazing groundswell of employees all raising their hands saying, yeah, I want a stigma-free environment too. I want to feel accepted for who I am. I want to be able to disclose to my manager safely, I need a day, I'm not doing well. So, we took a lot of great steps. We created a platform for people to share their story if they were comfortable. And when people share their story, other people can see themselves in that story, and then they feel less afraid. And ultimately, they don't have to be, in fear, in shame. They could relate to a peer. They can understand where they're coming from. So there's that. There's great employee resource. I want to say EAP, employee assistance, but really making that accessible for people if they're dealing with something. So there's a lot of great things that can be done. Peer-to-peer communities could be created where people with lived experience can truly support one another. There's a lot of great opportunity for companies to do more to create more inclusion for people with mental illness. Because at the end of the day, what managers and leaders need to remember is that disability costs are huge. And whether or not you're
Yes.
looking at it or want to acknowledge it, a very large percentage of your disability costs are going to mental illness. And your employee is saying, oh, I have a physical illness, when really it could be mental illness, or it could be a physical illness manifested by a mental illness. So whether you acknowledge it or not, it's happening. And it's a great opportunity to do more and really create an inclusive space for your people.
Wow, that's a great analogy of assistance. I allow me to say that in many instances, as an educator, it was difficult for me, and this is not about me, but it was difficult for me to get my instructors to understand and my colleagues to
Mm-hmm.
understand some of the things that you're sharing, because we can see a physical
Yeah.
illness, or a physical
Mm-hmm.
challenge, as you've already stated, if someone needs a ramp or something of that nature. But when we have, unfortunately, what the world calls normal, because I have two eyes, where you know where
I
I'm
do.
going with this, where everything is, quote, the appearance of
Yeah.
normal, and it seems very difficult. So with that statement, I know you've explained really, really well about that. Have you had to, what word am I looking for? Have you had to face that sometimes with individuals that may not have been so receptive to really understanding that mental illness is really a challenge for some people, and that they may appear to be, quote, normal, unquote, from the physical structure?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the opportunity is for when managers have an employee that all of a sudden their performance is slipping, right? And you immediately want to go and say, oh, well, they're just not they're underperforming. A genuinely concerned, caring, emotionally intelligent leader will really understand if it is a performance issue, and maybe ask a few questions to help really understand if it's more than that. So I think, my own personal experience was I dealt with depression last year, and 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 it takes something to disclose that to your leader. Really takes something. Like, do I want to show that vulnerability? Are they gonna remove me from opportunities? Are they gonna look down on me? Are they I don't know. There's such fear around just disclosing. And I did disclose. And I was upset with how it was received, because it took something for
Mhm.
me. I thought, I'm going to speak up. I'm going to say something. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to say, this isn't, I was a top performer for X amount of years. This is, I'm dealing with a life event. So we really
Yes.
need to do, so at the end of the day, what I think is critical is that people, leaders, understand, are trained and know how to support their people, and understand if they are having a mental illness or if it truly is performance related.
Oh, wow. That's good. Well, listen, I'm going to look back at some of the questions we talked about earlier. Earlier, you said influencing how our youth relate to mental health via the Children's Wellness
Mm-hmm.
Program that I created to help kids build a healthy rapport to mental well-being, along with the tools and courage to speak up if they need help. Can you address that a little bit,
Sure,
please?
sure. So I had created a children's wellness program that had evolved, as you mentioned in the intro. We reached 2,000 children, and over the past several years, but now it's evolved into a mental health program, and I'm super excited about this because if I have it my way, I think every middle school should get this program. It's a 1-day mental health or brain health, like workshop experience. So almost like a health fair. And what we do is we train the honor students in some basic concepts like around gratitude and empathy and bucket filling and emotions, even a guided meditation. And the students deliver it to their peers. And
Okay.
and then the peers are getting an entirely new toolbox of things that they can do when they're overwhelmed and they're feeling anxiety and they're feeling um, anxious, and you know testing shows up, whatever it is. So it really is about empowering kids to understand their emotions and have their well-being addressed. So that program is now a mental health 1-day school-wide health fair. So I'm excited to see that expand, because the difference that it's making for the kids, just in simply, being able to manage their emotions and really get connected to their well-being, is so important, because I think we have such a great opportunity to shape their relationship to brain health, so there's no stigma for them. For us as adults, we're like, let's remove stigma. Okay, let's remove stigma. What if there's no stigma for our youth? What if we raise them in a way where they're very comfortable talking about brain health, and they're very comfortable saying, you know what, I'm overwhelmed. I think I need some support. And they have the courage to raise their hand and not try to navigate it on their own.
Yeah. Wow. That is so important. That is so, as you share that, Michelle, with all of the talk lately about the CTE situation with athletes and individuals that are, the chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and how this may be causing severe brain damage, and children being how can I put it? Well, just put it. I'm just going to just put it, being affected academically because of certain areas of the brain being affected, and so now it's compounded, and you have, of course, how can I say this? I'm trying to be nice here, because I feel frustrated sometimes when our children are held responsible for things that are out of their control when it is mental illness.
Yeah.
But no one seems to want to touch upon that. So I share that simply because, as you share about being an advocate for children, and last question I'll ask about that before we talk about your book. Do you find parents understanding that their children are really challenged, not only by what we may term, if there's any such term as regular mental illness, as opposed to their athletes that may be uh, uh, inflicted, I'll say, with symptoms of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the brain
Yeah.
injury. Have you had that conversation with any parents?
It's a full range, because when we do the health fair, we also pull the parents of the students into a conversation about what we taught them to empower them in the home. And the thing that I'm noticing just by the level of engagement by parents is we have some work to do with the parents around their understanding and their relationship to mental health. It's not,
Okay.
Talk about stigma. I mean, everyone comes to the table with their experience and their frame of reference around what mental health is. So if you have a parent that fundamentally has a belief about that, it's hard. When we did the wellness program in Rockaway a few months back, we held the parent education session where we fully intended to have them experience the fair, talk to them about ways they could sustain the change in their home. And I was really upset by the lack of engagement by the parents. I really wanted there to be
Okay.
more parents there. And then I recall, when I was in the corporate setting and we had this big event on World Mental Health Day and we had like 5 people in the audience. That's, I think, a reflection of people's level of comfort around mental health. So, I mean, I think there's some work to be done to really get people into the conversation, calling it brain health, right? The brain is just another organ. If you hurt any other organ,
Right.
you would get support for it. So let's call it brain health. Like, let's not make it something big. Maybe that's part of the problem. So to answer your question, it's been hard to reach the parents. And I think it's because we all have our own biases and our own experiences and our own relationship to mental health. And that's where we have to do more around the general stigma of it so people get more comfortable talking about it openly. And then also saying, oh, well, this could affect my child too. Okay. So what can I do? What can I do to support them?
Wow. Well, listen, let's talk about the
Sure.
book. It's very interesting, and feel free to show the cover. And let's talk a little bit about the book. Let's talk a little bit.
Sure. So I wrote the book, released it in 2018, and it's really my memoir, which is designed to to really humanize my experience. But also I wanted to write it to show that, everyone has something in their past. And my story is one of perseverance and triumph over the past. We can live in the stories of what happened to us, or we can persevere in the face of them. And so with a lot of self-discovery work, a lot of therapy, a lot of leadership courses that I took, I've been able to emerge in a space where I'm turning it on its head and trying to do something positive with it. But my past might be a little bit different than other people's, but we all have something that caused us pain in our past. And it can either run the show for us now, or we get a say in how our future goes. So, if I can share in my story that I'm able to overcome that and create something positive out of it, I just want people to see that there's hope for them, that whatever that story is, that they can work through that and not be a victim of the past.
Okay. Well, do you have a copy available? Would you like to show the cover of it? Okay.
Yes. So this is it.
Okay. And listen, that's a very interesting cover. When I saw that, I go like, wow. Will you explain to us how did you come by selecting that
Sure.
cover?
So you'll see the chains down here, right? And then the butterflies and then the hands. So, it's so funny. This was an image that was in my head probably for the past 15 years. And I think it really vividly represents being a victim, or being at the effects of the past. The chains represent being at the effects of the past, and then the hands opening to the butterfly is the transformation, right? The metamorphosis, the transformation into something better, something beautiful versus the chains. So I really wanted to vividly kind of represent how I was emerging from the pain of the past and creating something beautiful in the future.
Right. Okay. Hey, very interesting. Well, listen, we promised that we wouldn't keep you long. I know you have another engagement, and I have put your website information on board already. If you would like to share another outlet that our listeners may contact you, please feel free to do so at this time.
Sure. So you could find me on Instagram for sure. I'm on Instagram. I'm Michelle Dickinson 71. Feel free to follow me there. You can reach out to me on email, on my website. If you want to learn more about my children's program, there's a great video about the kids' experience, explaining what that was like for them, so you can kind of see in their words what that was like. And if you're interested in bringing that to your middle school, let me know. I'm so happy to, initiate those conversations. And if you want to start a conversation in your workplace to create a more inclusive workplace, and maybe share with your leadership some suggestions on how you can do that, reach out to me as well. I'm happy to share.
Oh, fantastic. Michelle, listen, it's been great having you here, and we're so happy that you're here. And hopefully you'll come back again, and we can get in more detail and maybe pick out a chapter or two of the book, or one chapter, or several excerpts that you might want to share. Obviously, we're not going to ask you to do your book on the screen. But listen, guys, we thank all of you for joining the Nobody Asked Me Guys show. We thank you for being very patient with us. We had a few glitches, however. That's called Murphy's Law, and many of us know how that works. You can contact me at www.dyingonmyfeet.com. And there you will find all of my social media outlets. So again, thank you very much for watching the Nobody Asked Me Guys show, and we will see you again. Have a great and wonderful day. Michelle, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.